Sawadee-kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today we're doing our Pali Canon and English study group, where all the students throughout the world who have gathered in this Facebook group and are interested in studying the Pali Canon are reading these books, 13 different books that have the words of the Buddha. And we're coming together today as our second class in this Pali Canon and English study group, where I will provide you the opportunity to ask questions and get help on any reading and studying that you've been doing at home, and you're seeking guidance to understand the words of the Buddha more clearly. The way that we start out these classes is first we do meditation. We're going to do a short breathing mindfulness meditation for maybe about 15 minutes or so. And then afterwards, we're going to move into studying and exploring, investigating chapters 26 through 51 of this book, Following Dhamma's Trail. This is a 13-book series that is available for print. You can purchase it in print, or you can download it through our Facebook group. If you go to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, you can actually download this book in PDF format, and all the other books, all 13 books, are going to be published into the same Facebook group. If you go to that Facebook group, Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, and then click on the Files menu, you'll see the books there that are listed one by one, and you can download them and study with our group. Because for the last week, people have been studying chapter 26 through 51, and now is our time to come together for the students to ask any questions that they might have. And then in our Facebook group, each day, I'm posting a series of the chapters, anywhere from 3 to 4 chapters each day, so that people in the Facebook group can actually access the teachings there and ask any questions online. And you're also welcome to private message me or schedule any personal appointments where we can have a personal discussion about the teachings in this book or the teachings from our group learning program, which uses this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Nibbana. So I'd like to go ahead and invite you to prepare the body for meditation. Go ahead and take whatever position you like, either sitting, standing, or lying, and we'll do a 15-minute breathing mindfulness meditation or thereabouts in order to kind of prepare the mind for study. This is one of the best ways to prepare the mind to receive the teachings of the Buddha, through actually helping the mind to be more single focused and clear the mind of any clutter. So before you actually read the Dhamma, or before you study in a class, or before you take in a talk from a teacher, it's really helpful to actually meditate prior. So go ahead and get your body comfortable, and your upper body should be nice and erect, and then place your hands and arms wherever they're comfortable. Go ahead and close the eyes and just start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. I'm just going to give very little guidance after chanting. Just breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanang Apivateyami Savakhato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato สัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิจาจารณังสัมมุโนสัคขะโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรภูริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามานุสนังพุทโธภควาติ Should just be breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Focus the mind on the breath as the present moment, cutting off any thoughts, letting them go, and just focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. If the mind wanders, goes anywhere other than the breath, wherever you notice that, just let it go. Cut it off and bring the mind back to the breath, the sound of the breath, or the sensation of the air entering the nose. Breathing in and out. This is your time. No one needs you right now. Just focus on the breath. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธภะคะวาโหตังภะคะวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตภะคะวะตาธัมโมธัมมังนามาสามิสุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิจาจารณังสัมพุโนสัคขะโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรภูริสานามาสติสัตตาตาวามานุสนังพุทโธภคะวาติ Okay, if you guys could go ahead and start bringing yourself out of meditation. Meditating before learning is one of the best things you can do. Meditation alone is one of the best things you can do, but doing it prior to learning is really, really helpful. So before you read, whether it's the Buddha's book or this book from the group learning program, you can meditate prior and then do your learning for 30 minutes or an hour or whatever you're going to do, 2 hours. And then you can even meditate at the end as well. This really helps to soak the teachings into the mind. You can do this prior to sitting in a talk with a teacher and then afterwards as well. This is how we clear the mind and declutter the mind before bringing in these teachings of the Buddha so that they will kind of soak in more readily. So that's why each class will be meditating a little bit before, but you're welcome to do meditation on your own either before and or after class as well. So I would like to start with asking anyone that might have any questions about chapter 26 through 51. We're going to spend the rest of our class on that, and we're going to be separating the questions based on 3 different groups. So we're going to go from chapter 26 to 36, and then 36 to 46, and then 46 to 51. So that way we kind of stay within the same range. We're going to be displaying the chapters through Zoom as well as through our live stream. But for any of you guys that have this actual book, or if you've downloaded the PDF, you can also look directly there as well. What we're going to be displaying in Zoom and on our live stream is from the PDF, because I've updated the translations to have this book read as one continuous author, because what we've got now is we've got this curated version of the Pali Canon where people have pulled out the most important teachings in these 13 books, but the translations are actually done by a bunch of different people, so they read differently depending on which translator you're actually reading. So if you go from one chapter to another in this book, you're actually reading different authors. But if you download the PDF, not only will you get the updated translations, but it's kind of written in one particular language from one particular author. So I encourage you guys to continue to use this if you like the printed versions. But if you would like the updated translations and kind of a more consistent read, you can download the PDF from our Facebook group, Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, through clicking on the Files menu. And from there, you'll get the PDF for this particular book, Following Dhamma's Trail. So any questions from chapter 26 through 36?
Hi, David. So I was wondering if we might be able to look at chapter number 31 to start off with.
Sure.
Just generally.
And just as a reminder for anyone who's joining us on Facebook or YouTube or in the virtual classroom in Zoom, you can ask questions by typing those into the comment section. Our moderator, Max, will be able to find that and ask it during class. And those of you guys in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask questions directly.
So I thought we could just maybe review this whole chapter, because I wasn't sure what he was pointing to when he's talking about the 6 animals.
Sure.
I think it might be worth looking at the whole chapter.
Sure. Let's go ahead and I'll just read it through once, okay? And then we'll kind of go back and look at it. This is chapter 31. It's titled, A Strong Post or Pillar is a Designation for Mindfulness. And this is the Buddha speaking. And how, bhikkhus, is there restraint? Here, having seen a form with the eye, having heard a sound with the ear, having smelt an odor with the nose, having savored a taste with the tongue, having felt a tactile object with the body, having cognized a mental phenomenon with the mind, a bhikkhu is not intent upon a pleasing form and not repelled by a displeasing form. He dwells having set up mindfulness of the body with a measureless mind, and he understands as it really is that liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom, wherein those evil, unwholesome states cease without remainder. It is in such a way that there is restraint. Suppose, bhikkhus, a man would catch 6 animals with different domains and different feeding grounds and tie them by a strong rope. He would catch a snake, a crocodile, a bird, a dog, a jackal, and monkey, and tie each by a strong rope. Having done so, he would bind them to a strong post or pillar. Then those 6 animals with different domains and different feeding grounds would each pull in different directions of its own feeding ground and domain. The snake would pull one way, thinking, "Let me enter an ant hill." And then he goes through all the different animals. So the author here is kind of summarizing it and kind of putting as above. So he goes through all the different animals, with the last one being, the monkey would pull another way, thinking, "Let me enter a forest." Now, when these 6 animals become worn out and fatigued, they would stand close to that post or pillar. They would sit down there. They would lie down there. So too, bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu has developed and cultivated mindfulness directed to the body, the eye does not pull in the direction of agreeable forms, nor are disagreeable forms repulsive. The ear does not pull in the direction of agreeable sounds, nor are disagreeable sounds repulsive. The nose does not pull in the direction of agreeable odors, nor are disagreeable odors repulsive. The tongue does not pull in the direction of agreeable taste, nor are disagreeable tastes repulsive. The body does not pull in the direction of agreeable tactile objects, nor are disagreeable tactile objects repulsive. The mind does not pull in the direction of agreeable mental phenomenon, nor are disagreeable mental phenomenon repulsive, in such a way that there is restraint. A strong post or pillar, this, bhikkhus, is a designation for mindfulness directed to the body. Therefore, bhikkhus, you should train yourselves thus. We will develop and cultivate mindfulness directed to the body. Make it our vehicle, make it our basis, stabilize it, exercise ourselves in it, and fully perfect it. Thus should you train yourselves. Okay, let me explain what he's sharing here. He's using the analogy of strong post or pillar to represent the meditation practice, your meditation practice, mindfulness of breathing or breathing mindfulness meditation. That's the strong post or pillar that he's describing here. The 6 animals that he's talking about, these are the 6 sense faculties or the 6 sense bases. These are the eyes, nose, mouth, ear, the body, and the mind. Whenever you see 6, the Buddha is typically going to be referring to the 6 senses, because all discontentedness of the mind enters into the mind through one of these 6 ways. It's when you see certain things that are displeasing to the mind that the mind then becomes discontent, or you hear certain things in the ear that the mind becomes discontent. You smell certain things and the mind becomes discontent. You taste certain things, you feel certain things on the body, or you have a certain thought. The mind itself being the 6th sense, it causes discontentedness because it sees something displeasing. So what the Buddha is saying here is these 6 animals, these 6 senses are essentially pulling in all these different directions. And if you use breathing mindfulness meditation to train the mind as that post or pillar, eventually these 6 senses will get tired of pulling in all these different directions, and it will just sit by the post or pillar. The mind will become stable and tranquil and concentrated and sit in the middle. It will no longer have a desire or craving, this mental longing and strong eagerness to pull with the eye in a certain direction, or pull toward the ear or the nose or the tongue or certain bodily contact or the mind. With training of the mind through breathing mindfulness meditation, the mind will just sit still in the middle. And that's what he's sharing here. He goes into talking about forms, pleasing forms. This is starting to go into the 5 aggregates a little bit, which this book actually goes into, because there's the form. When we're talking about form, we're talking about physical form. So if someone has trained their mind in breathing mindfulness meditation and they understand that the 6 senses are going to be pulling in these different directions, then what you need to do is, through training the mind to be still and calm, you then guard these senses. So let's just say somebody has an affection to see certain pleasant things. Say somebody admires beautiful women or beautiful men, and every time you're in public, you look and you see some beautiful woman or beautiful man. This is going to be very pleasing to the mind. The mind has this mental longing and strong eagerness, and it's going to pull in that direction. And then maybe it has craving for sexual contact, and maybe you already have a partner, and maybe now you act upon that with speech and actions in order to have contact, sexual contact with this individual. rather than being loyal and faithful to your partner, which is going to lead you in making decisions that are going to cause unwholesome results. So it's these six senses that's going to pull the mind in a certain direction. And through breathing mindfulness meditation and being attentive to these six senses and guarding them, if you observe that when you're in public, your eyes pull towards a beautiful woman or beautiful man, you then need to gain control over that and guard that, recognize that as craving, and don't have what the Buddha is talking about here is don't allow the eye to pull in the direction of agreeable forms. These are pleasing forms. But also, don't allow the mind to feel repulsive towards disagreeable forms. Whether a person you feel is beautiful or you feel they're not so beautiful, don't be repulsed by things that the mind sees. Let's give another example. Maybe you see a living person with the eyes, and this person who's alive, sure, that's agreeable to you. You feel that, yeah, this person's alive. But then if you see someone hurt, or if you see a child being hit, or you see a dead body, this is disagreeable to the mind, and you might be repulsed by it, and you might push it away. And what the Buddha is saying is you need to remain unaffected by agreeable forms or disagreeable forms, maintaining the mind in the middle like a pillar or a post. And it's breathing mindfulness meditation that he's talking about here at the end, which is the way to restrain the mind. Because in breathing mindfulness meditation, when various thoughts come to the mind, you're cutting it off, you're letting it go, you're bringing the mind to the breath. And then the mind goes to the future. You're cutting it off. You're letting it go, bringing the mind back to the breath. The mind goes to the past. You cut it off, let it go, bring the mind to the breath. So then in daily life, if you see something agreeable and you feel the mind pulling in that direction because of the eyes, you've got to cut it off, let it go. Or if you see something repulsive that you feel at this time is repulsive, you have to let that go. And you have to cut it off, and you have to maintain the concentration, your equanimity, your stableness of mind. Maybe you see someone who's handicapped or physically deformed. And when you see that, maybe the mind feels that it's repulsive, right? If you see somebody who's deformed from maybe an injury or a traumatic event or something like this, you might have certain negative thoughts about that. And what the Buddha is saying here is, don't allow the mind to do that. Cut it off, let it go. Train the mind in breathing mindfulness meditation, and more you will be able to experience this where you can then have control over these six senses, because the senses are kind of triggers to the mind, and then the mind is either going to become happy, excited, elated, or sad, or angered, or frustrated, or bored, or lonely, or shy, based on what it's taking in through these senses. And training the mind to be in the middle and enlightened, it doesn't matter what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you taste, what you feel in the body. The mind is no longer searching externally for these pleasant feelings, so therefore it's not going to experience painful feelings either when it sees something disagreeable to the mind. It can just stay in the middle, perfectly peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy.
Thank you very much, David, for discussing that one. We've had a request to look at number 26 from Chris.
Okay.
So if I just slide back to number 26. So there was a specific question about this one, which was, did they have nurses in the time of the Buddha? But it does also seem like a good one just to look at overall, I think.
Yeah, surely they had nurses during the time of the Buddha, people that were responsible for medical care. One of the things that I find interesting here in this Dhamma is, if you notice when he's talking about the boy that's got something in his mouth and maybe choking, the remedy here is for the nurse to hook the finger and stick it in and pull it out. And that's what we actually do today too. If somebody's choking, we do the Heimlich maneuver, but one of the things we can also do is use our finger and kind of hook and pull things out. So it's interesting that this goes back even 2,500 years ago. What this particular Dhamma is talking about is it's talking about an infant boy who is unknowing of how to essentially eat and digest food. And the nurse essentially has concern for the little boy when the boy gets something stuck in its throat, right? A pebble or some kind of something in the throat. And the nurse would quickly take care of him and hook her finger or his finger and pull out this item from the mouth. And no matter what it takes, the Buddha is saying this nurse would do whatever she can do to help this little boy and get this object unlodged from its throat. And essentially, this boy being in distress, the nurse would do this out of loving kindness and compassion for the boy. But once the boy's out of distress and the boy has grown up and has learned more and understands how to eat and digest food and not to put foreign objects in its mouth, then the nurse wouldn't be concerned with that little boy. She would be unconcerned because she knows that this boy would be able to take care of himself. So if you've ever been around children, if you're around an infant or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old child, you're pretty much watching and being aware of whatever they put into their mouth, because they like to put a lot of things into their mouth. They're starting to teeth and they like to put things in their mouth, and you're kind of aware because they don't know what things should go in their mouth, what things shouldn't go in their mouth. They don't realize by putting things in their mouth, they can actually kill themselves because they're ignorant to that. They're unknowing of that. And he's using the analogy of the nurse to say that, yeah, while this baby is young and unknowing of true reality or unwise, the nurse is going to be more concerned and more watchful of this boy. But when he gets older and he has more wisdom, the nurse isn't going to be as concerned, and she or he is going to just let the boy look after himself. Then the Buddha says he's the same way when it comes to one of his students, one of the bhikkhus, that when they first start training with him, they're not accomplished in confidence and cultivating wholesome qualities. They don't have a sense of shame in cultivating wholesome qualities. They don't have moral dread in cultivating wholesome qualities. They don't have the energy. They're somewhat complacent still in cultivating wholesome qualities. They don't have the wisdom of what wholesome qualities are and what unwholesome qualities are. So the Buddha, as being a teacher, he looks after them and attends to them when they're kind of younger in their training and they're just starting out. But then once a student or a bhikkhu becomes accomplished in all of these things, becomes accomplished in wholesome qualities, becomes accomplished in wisdom and all the other things that are listed out there, that ... is just a way of essentially saying everything you saw in the previous paragraph, put it here. And the Buddha says at that point, once they're accomplished and they're more developed in confidence and wholesome qualities and they've more accomplished in wisdom, then he's unconcerned about them, thinking that, this student can look after himself. He won't be heedless. Heedless is losing attention or losing awareness of mind. So essentially the Buddha is saying that early in a student's development, he's more attentive, more kind of alert, more kind of concerned about their well-being. And then as they develop, his concern is less. And he knows that this student is more accomplished and therefore can look after themselves.
Okay, we have a number of people interested in looking at chapter 29.
Okay, let's go to that one. Oh, yes. This one is one
And
that...
we had a specific question on this chapter.
Okay.
Okay, so Nick asks, what exactly is the difference between near shore, far shore, and whirlpool? I see the shores are about the 5 aggregate senses and what we let into the 6th. But what does it mean by the external and internal? I was thinking the aggregates for the external and the mind for the internal, but how does the whirlpool fit in? My understanding is kind of intermixing them.
Okay. So let me read through this one and then we'll come back and look at it. Before I read it though, I would like to share this. Gotama Buddha described attaining enlightenment and the 4 stages of enlightenment. He described it as a stream or entering the water. So this is why we call the first stage of enlightenment a stream enterer. So one side of the shore is essentially the unenlightened mind, and the other side is essentially like enlightenment, or one side is the unenlightened mind entering the stream, and then walking up the stream is like going to enlightenment, kind of walking against the current and walking towards enlightenment. So he's using the stream here to essentially talk about this enlightened mind. So the next book that we're going to read this week is called Sotapanna. It's all about stream entry, which is the first stage of enlightenment. So here, when he's talking about the simile of a great log and he's using the shores, the near shore is essentially like being unenlightened. And that's where most people are. They're on the near shore. And then as we go through this simile, he's describing the various places along the stream or the other shore where people can fall down and sink and kind of not reach the ultimate goal, which is enlightenment, kind of walking up this stream. So let me describe it now. With that understanding, it probably will help you more to understand what he's talking about here. The simile of the great log. Do you see, bhikkhus, the great log being carried along by the current of the river Ganges? This is a really famous river in India. Yes, venerable sir. If, bhikkhus, that log does not veer towards the near shore, does not veer towards the far shore, does not sink in midstream, does not cast up on high ground, does not get caught by human beings, does not get caught by non-human beings, does not get caught in a whirlpool, and does not become inwardly rotten, it will slant, slope, and incline towards the ocean. For what reason? Because the current of the river Ganges slants, slopes, and inclines towards the ocean. So too, bhikkhus, if you do not veer towards the near shore, do not veer towards the far shore, do not sink in midstream, do not get cast up on high ground, do not get caught by human beings, do not get caught by non-human beings, do not get caught in a whirlpool, and do not become inwardly rotten, you will slant, slope, and incline towards nibbana. For what reason? Because right view slants, slopes, and inclines towards nibbana. When this was said, a certain bhikkhu asked the perfectly enlightened one, What, venerable sir, is the near shore? What is the far shore? What is sinking in midstream? What is getting cast up on high ground? What is getting caught by human beings? What is getting caught by non-human beings? What is getting caught in a whirlpool? What is inwardly rotten? The near shore, bhikkhus, this is the designation for the 6 internal sense bases. The far shore, this is a designation for the 6 external sense bases. Sinking in midstream, this is a designation for the delight and desire. Getting cast up on high ground, this is the designation for the conceit, I am. And what, bhikkhus, is getting caught by human beings? Here, someone lives in association with household practitioners. He rejoices with them and sorrows with them. He is happy when they are happy and sad when they are sad. And he involves himself in their affairs and duties. This is called getting caught by human beings. And what bhikkhus is getting caught by non-human beings? Here, someone lives the holy life with the aspiration to be reborn into a certain order of devas, thinking, by this virtue or vow or austerity or holy life, I will become a deva or one among the devas. This is called getting caught by non-human beings. Getting caught in a whirlpool, this bhikkhus is a designation for the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. And what bhikkhus is inward rotten? Here, someone is immoral, one of evil character, of impure and suspect behavior, secretive in his acts, no ascetic, though claiming to be one, not a celibate, though claiming to be one, inwardly rotten, corrupt, depraved. This is called inwardly rotten. Okay, so the log is essentially the person, right? And the log can get caught up and not make it to the ocean, not make it to Nibbana, right? And he's giving the log as an analogy of how we ourselves can get caught up and not actually attain enlightenment. And he uses these far shore, the near shore, far shore, sinking in midstream, cast up on high ground, getting caught by human beings, getting caught by non-human beings, the whirlpool, and inwardly rotten. And he talks about here how entering into the stream, it slants, slopes, and veers towards the ocean or towards Nibbana. And he talks about right view being what slants, slopes, and inclines towards Nibbana. So that first talk, the Four Noble Truths, understanding the 3 universal truths and the 4 noble truths, where essentially you start to understand that you are responsible for all the discontentedness in the mind. Because in the unenlightened mind, before coming in contact with these teachings, the unenlightened mind thinks that I'm mad because of my wife, or I'm mad because of my son, or I'm mad because of my car's broken, or I'm mad because of my boss, or I'm mad or angry because of my coworkers. The mind thinks that it's everyone else who's causing the mind to be discontent. But once you understand the Four Noble Truths and you see it clearly, then you establish right view and you start practicing right view, that wherever the mind becomes discontent, you always accept responsibility for that and you look at what is causing the mind to be discontent. It's always going to be some craving, desire, attachment, or perhaps multiple craving, desire, attachments. So once you establish and understand right view very clearly, this slants, slopes, and inclines towards Nibbana. Because if you deeply understand that you're responsible for all your discontentedness, then you'll never go back to blaming other people for why you're angry or why you're sad or why you feel guilty or shameful or frustrated. You will know with deep wisdom that it's all because of your mind. And once you establish that very clearly, you're on your way to Nibbana at that point, because that's the first step of the Eightfold Path, and you'll never go back to thinking that someone else is causing your own discontentedness ever again. And this is one of the reasons why you see the Buddha constantly coming back to the Four Noble Truths. In his talks, he just always keeps coming back to that over and over and over and over again, to the Four Noble Truths. And that's why I spend so much time talking about the 3 universal truths and the Four Noble Truths, because once you establish right view, you're going to slant, slope, and incline towards Nibbana. Now, what is the near shore? What is the far shore? We'll go through these. The near shore is the designation for the 6 internal sense bases. So the near shore is where you are in the unenlightened mind. You are already on the near shore. You are already caught up in the 6 internal sense bases. That is you feeling some kind of security. you holding on to the near shore, thinking that you need to please these six senses in order for the mind to be pleased. And you feel a lot of safety there, and you may not feel comfortable entering into the water, but that's the near shore. And you can get caught up in that, and you can think that what this life is all about is pleasing these six internal sense bases. Okay, and that's the safety of the near shore. The far shore is essentially the external sense bases and trying to seek pleasure externally. So someone might go from the near shore and now go to the far shore. They haven't really improved their condition much. It's just on the near shore, you're looking inward and trying to please these senses inwardly, and now you're trying to please them externally. So the two shores are not where you would like to be. You don't want to be on the shore, right? The mind thinks you're safe on the shore, but what you need to do is you need to enter into the stream. The third scenario he talks about here is sinking in midstream. This is the designation for delight and desire. This is craving, desire, attachment. This is once you're in the stream, you might start arising craving and feeling delightful, and then you sink and kind of fall down in midstream and kind of drown essentially. And the log or you aren't going to actually make it to the ocean because the log just sinks and gets mired and absorbed, right? This log gets absorbed by the water and it sinks down into the water. The mind gets absorbed by this delight, this pleasure, this craving, desire, attachment, and it just gets so mired in this mass of craving that it just sinks and goes to the bottom and just stays there, right? Getting cast up on high ground, this is conceit, I am. This is arrogance, ego, thinking that I'm so wonderful, I'm so great, look at me. Even when you're studying these teachings for a while, people can get a certain level of awareness of mind with these teachings, and the ego isn't yet dissolved all the way. And you can have people that are very boastful or arrogant or prideful, measuring and comparing, even in Buddhist communities where people feel like, look at me, I'm so great, I'm so wonderful, I know all these teachings, look how miraculous I am that I know the Buddhist teachings. And this is getting caught on high ground, the conceit, I am, arrogance, measuring and comparing, prideful, right? That is going to inhibit you from attaining enlightenment. Then he talks about getting caught up by human beings. Of course, the ascetics or the bhikkhus, the monks, they've essentially left their homes and they're now homeless. And they will stay in certain places during the Buddhist time, oftentimes in the forest, but they would sometimes stay in the homes of household practitioners, because household practitioners would invite the bhikkhus to come stay with them for a few days, because this way they could really deeply learn with the bhikkhus in daily life. The bhikkhus could be there with them for multiple days at a time and training them in their actual home. And this is what people do nowadays. They'll oftentimes invite monks to come stay with them, but there are certain guidelines around doing that. Or people might invite their teacher, their Buddhist teacher, to come stay with them for a while, or go on vacation with them or holiday with them. And they'll take their teacher or the monks around on holiday so that they can kind of get these little 10-minute lessons here and there, these little 5-minute lessons here and there, and kind of absorb the teachings a bit more. So the Buddha is saying here that the bhikkhus can get caught up with human beings. And you can relate this because you're not a bhikkhu. You can relate this to other people around you, your coworkers, your friends, your family. If you essentially sorrow with them when they feel sad and they become discontent, if you're like, oh, Melissa, I'm so sorry to hear you broke up with your boyfriend. Oh, that's so miserable. And you sorrow with them. Or Melissa gets a brand new car and you get so happy for her and so excited with her. If you allow your mind to be swayed by what's going on amongst the minds of people around you, then your mind is being caught up by human beings, by other beings, human beings. They're actually essentially, you're allowing your mind to rejoice or feel sorrow, feel happy or sad based on their mind and their attachments. And the Buddha is saying, essentially don't allow that to happen. That you've got to control your own mind and not have it attached to the emotions of other people. Then being caught up by non-human beings. This is where some people in Buddhist communities will say, I'm not going to practice the Buddhist teachings too much. I'm just going to practice them enough that I can improve my life a little bit during this life. And then my real aspiration is to be reborn into the heavenly realm in my next life. And then that's where I'll attain enlightenment. This is a common thing in Thailand. Some communities of people, I've heard my wife at one time used to talk like this, where she would say, I'm probably not going to get to enlightenment this life, but if I can just practice good enough, then my next life I'll be reborn into the heavenly realm and I'll get enlightenment there. But what they don't realize is that they can actually not attain enlightenment in the heavenly realm, and they can be reborn down into one of the other realms. So the Buddha is saying here, one of the ways to get caught up and not get to enlightenment is that if you have the aspiration to be reborn into the heavenly realm, then you will essentially get caught up by non-human beings. Here, this one sentence he talks about, by this virtue or vow of austerity or holy life. One of the things you will hear in other traditions of Buddhist teachings is they will actually take a vow that will say, I'm not going to attain enlightenment in this life. I'm going to hold back and I'm going to help other people attain enlightenment, but I'm not going to do it myself. I'm going to constantly be reborn and come back in order to help other people attain enlightenment. And the Buddha is clearly saying here, no, that's not the goal. The goal is for you to attain enlightenment now in this life, not to aspire to be reborn in the heavenly realm. Then getting caught up in the whirlpool. This is the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go to Google and remind myself of what are the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. I looked this up earlier before class because I had a feeling that somebody would have a question about this. There's a translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi on, I think it's Sutra Central, where he talks about the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. Okay, these are just the 5 senses without the mind. I just wanted to make sure of that. Oh, he's got the mind in here too. So I'm not sure how this is different than the near shore and far shore. 5 chords of sensual pleasures which have passed, ceased, changed, been seen on your own welfare. Yeah, this one is, oh, I see. This one is talking about the 5 aggregates. Okay, this one is connecting the 5 aggregates to the senses. So the 5 aggregates are what essentially makes a human being a human being. The form aggregate, the feelings, the perceptions, the volitional formations, and the consciousness, the mind itself. So that's what the 5 chords of sensual pleasure are, is these senses now eliciting certain emotions and feelings based on these 5 aggregates. Okay, so that would just kind of suck you down in a whirlpool is what he's saying. And then the inwardly rotten one, this one is essentially like an ascetic or a household practitioner who is essentially claiming that they're pursuing this path to enlightenment, but in reality they're really quite immoral. They have evil character. They don't have wholesome behavior. They're very secretive in their acts. They claim that they're celibate and they've given up sexual contact when they really haven't. They're corrupt. They're depraved. You'll see sometimes people who are ordained or household practitioners that are like this, that they look like they're actually practicing the teachings. They might be wearing the robes. They might be talking a good talk about the Buddhist teachings as a household practitioner. But when you look at their conduct, they're very evil or immoral. And we see this not only in Buddhist traditions, but we see this in other traditions too. This is why we sometimes see priests, for example, who are, maybe verbally, physically, or sexually abusing the parishioners of a church. Or you see monks sometimes that are doing these kind of things as well occasionally. But here in Thailand, when they find that stuff out, they stamp it out right away. They put the person in jail, and essentially this is a person who's posing as a monk or posing as a household practitioner of the Buddhist teachings, but in reality they're really not. And that's what inwardly rotten is, that they're corrupt, they're depraved, they're not truly practicing the teachings, they're just trying to appear as if they are. So these are the ways that the Buddha is talking about how we can get caught up and hung up and actually not attain enlightenment in this life. These are some of the significant ways that we should ensure that we're avoiding.
Okay, well, we have Alan up next, interested to ask a question about chapter 32.
Okay.
Okay, so Alan, I'm going to unmute you.
Hi, everybody. Hopefully I can maintain some degree of clarity for this question, David. So, the chapter in itself, starts with just the exposition on the value of breathing meditation, the mindfulness of breathing. And then it goes into kind of 4 paragraphs. And one says, breathing in long, he knows I breathe in long. Or breathing out long, he knows I breathe out long. And then that paragraph continues. And then the subsequent paragraph is, he trains thus, experiencing rapture, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing rapture, I will I'll breathe out. And then that paragraph continues. And then the next paragraph is, he trains thus, experiencing the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing the mind, I will breathe out. And that continues. And then the next paragraph, and then I will get to a point in the question, I promise you. He says, he trains thus, contemplating impermanence, I will breathe in. He trains thus, contemplating impermanence, I will breathe out. And, it seems like this is one of those chapters where the message and the gravity of the message seems pretty important. But in reading it, I'm picking it up in pieces, but I'm not picking it up as a whole message. And so I was kind of confused as to, is it telling you that there are 4 methods of meditation that you can go down? Or is this kind of a continued process where, it all still relates to breathing meditation, and then it's kind of, the development of the meditative practice from there on? Or is this saying, look, there are different ways that you can meditate?
Essentially what he's talking about here, the first part where he's saying, breathing in long, I know I breathe in long. Breathing in short, I know I breathe out short. What he's talking about there is bringing the focus of the mind to the breath, that you're just aware of the breath. These are kind of famous lines of the Buddha's. He's essentially he's actually guiding meditation. So where I'm saying, if your mind goes to the past, cut that off, let it go, bring it back to the breath. Or if it goes to the future, cut that off. He's essentially guiding people in meditation, and he's saying, be aware of your breath. If you breathe in long, know that you're breathing in long. If you breathe in short, know that you're breathing in short. So bring awareness to the breath. And then he's going through essentially various aspects of his teachings in order to kind of help them soak in. And I've done this on occasion too, where I've talked about the Eightfold Path or impermanence. And this is a way to kind of help the mind to soak in the teachings. So these aren't things that you need to memorize and actually repeat in your meditation. It's just the Buddha essentially guiding people in meditation. The goal here is that you do meditate and that you soak in the teachings through learning and gaining wisdom in the teachings. But if you're meditating the way that I've shared with breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation, then you're doing meditation and training the mind in the direction that the Buddha is describing here. This is essentially just him guiding people.
Okay, so Alan actually put himself back on mute, and I've just changed it so people can now unmute themselves. But he gave us a thumbs up nonetheless, David. So.
Okay, yeah, so there's nothing here that you need to memorize or that you need to recite or anything like this. It's just him providing guidance like I've often done in meditation sessions and describing, meditation and kind of helping people to focus their mind, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, and giving people something to think about in terms of soaking the teachings into the mind.
Okay, so we had a request from Bitblob to look at chapter 34.
Okay.
Chapter 34 is one who develops mindfulness of death keenly for the destruction of the taints.
Okay, I would like to just mention for anyone who's watching us on the live stream, I'm not able to go through the slides as I'm reading them. I mean, I can, but I actually have a hard time reading the text. So I'm actually using something else to read the slides. So you'll get a much better experience in the Zoom classroom because I think Max is actually moving forward as I read each individual chapter and paragraph. But I'm actually reading from something else that is better to read for my eyes. So I'd like to invite you to come into Zoom if you're not already there. So chapter 34, this one's about, the title here is one who developed mindfulness of death keenly for the destruction of the taints. Now, you guys know mindfulness, awareness of mind, and practicing breathing mindfulness meditation. But mindfulness by itself is awareness of mind. The taints, a taint is a pollution of the mind. These are referring to the 10 fetters. So once a practitioner learns the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, they're meditating regularly, they're building up their practice more and more, you start focusing on the 10 fetters. And when you eliminate all 10 fetters, that's when the mind's actually enlightened. So when you eliminate the 10 pollutions of the mind, the 10 taints, that's when the mind is cleared out, and now it experiences this brightness or this brilliance of the enlightened mind, right? And part of getting to the point where you actually are enlightened is you need to be comfortable with your own death. A lot of times people fear their own death, and you need to eliminate all fears, but you also need to eliminate the fear of any death, and you also need to eliminate any desire or craving or mental longing to be a certain place after death. You need to have your mind firmly rooted in the present moment. And if I die right now, this second, then I die. It doesn't matter. That's essentially the way that an enlightened being is going to feel, because this body and this mind, an enlightened being knows that's not who they are. And if this body ceases to exist right now, then that's okay. I'm not afraid of what's going to happen next. And what this Dhamma is actually teaching is it's going through and helping you to understand that you need to build an awareness of death. And you need to cultivate that in the mind, that you no longer fear death. And having done so, you will actually become what the Buddha calls the deathless. Once you attain enlightenment, he calls it the deathless, because essentially what you're doing through the process of enlightenment and through this path to enlightenment, by eliminating the taints, eliminating these 10 fetters, is you're essentially killing the mind. You're killing the unenlightened mind. You're killing that ego. You're killing the self. You're, getting rid of those central desires. You're getting rid of that ill will. All those different fetters. There's 10 of them there. Once you eliminate those and you get rid of them from the mind, and you train the mind so well, and you've trained it to the point where it no longer experiences discontentedness and it's enlightened, then and as part of that process, you've eliminated any fear of death. Now, when the physical body dies, it really isn't like there's any death. You have the body's physically died, but the mind already died when you were progressing and progressed to enlightenment. Not died literally, but you've essentially gotten rid of all this pollution of the mind. You've essentially killed the mind. So now by the time the physical body dies, it's almost like there is no death at all. We actually call death final enlightenment or final nibbana, where the mind and the body fully separate from each other. So we call this the deathless. Once you attain enlightenment, you've now attained the state of the deathless, where there is no more death. And having attained enlightenment, there's no longer any rebirth, which means because there's no longer going to be any birth, there's no longer going to be any sickness, aging, or death either. So by training the mind to enlightenment, you've essentially killed the mind. You've attained this state of enlightenment, which we call the state of deathless, which there is no more death because you're not afraid of death. You don't fear death. It's just this physical body dying. And now there's no more rebirth. So there's no longer any more birth, sickness, aging, and death. It's called the deathless, right? So what the Buddha is saying here is bhikkhus, mindful of death, awareness of mind of death, when developed and cultivated. So you need to develop awareness of death, is of great fruit and benefit. So essentially getting comfortable with your own death, culminating in the deathless. This will all culminate to the point of enlightenment where you no longer will experience death because you've already killed the mind through practicing the teachings. You've already eliminated all of these fetters and these taints from the mind. Having the deathless as its consummation. So consummation is like bringing something to a head or bringing it to a close. So if you develop awareness of death and cultivate that in the mind, then it's of much fruit and benefit, culminating in this state of deathless where you will no longer experience death because you'll no longer be reborn. But do you bhikkhus develop mindfulness of death? So he's asking them, is this something that you guys do? When this was said, one bhikkhu said to the perfectly enlightened one, Bhante, this is like sir or venerable, right? I develop mindfulness of death. Bhikkhus, the bhikkhu who develops mindfulness of death, thus, may I live just a night and a day so that I may attend to the perfectly enlightened one's teaching. I could then accomplish much. And he goes through lesser and lesser iterations where the time span gets smaller and smaller and smaller, where essentially people are saying, hey, if I could just learn the teachings from the Buddha for this short period of time, eventually getting to the very last one where may I live just the length of time it takes to chew and swallow 4 or 5 mouthfuls of food so that I may attend to the perfectly enlightened one's teachings. I could then accomplish much. These are called bhikkhus who dwell heedlessly, like they're not thinking with their mind. They're kind of unalert or unattentive, right? They develop mindfulness of death sluggishly for the destruction of the taints. So essentially, these people who are looking to have all this time with the Buddha, all this more and more and more time, he's saying you're essentially complacent to apply effort and energy to destroy this pollution or destruction of these taints that need to be removed from the mind. But the bhikkhus who develop mindfulness of death, thus may I live just the length of time it takes to chew and swallow a single mouthful of food, right? So this time is like really, really short, saying like, do it right now. I need to develop mindfulness of death, like in this very short time frame. And he goes through getting less and less and less. May I just live for the length of time it takes to breathe in and out, kind of one time. I could then accomplish much. These are called bhikkhus who dwell heedfully, right? These people are alert and aware because they're interested in doing it right now. They're not delaying, they're not procrastinating, they're not complacent. They're looking to learn and practice. They develop mindfulness of death keenly for the destruction of the taints. So they're looking to do it, right now. They're not delaying, they're not procrastinating. Therefore, bhikkhus, you should train yourselves thus. We will dwell heedfully. We will develop mindfulness of death keenly for the destruction of the taints. Thus, you should train yourselves. So, let's get on it and let's take care of it. Let's do it. Let's not delay this for longer and longer periods. Let's not procrastinate. Let's not become complacent. Let's make sure that we're working in the direction of enlightenment, which includes developing awareness of death and being comfortable with your own death.
Okay, next up we have Messiah asking about chapter 35.
Okay.
Which is direct knowledge for a sick one.
All right, let's go into that one. Does she have a specific question or just overall discuss it?
Overall in this one.
Okay. Here we go. This is a little bit short compared to the ones we have been looking at. Chapter 35. Direct knowledge for a sick one. Bhikkhus, if 5 things do not slip away from frail and sick bhikkhu, it can be expected of him in no long time with the destruction of the taints. Remember those 10 fetters, right? The taints. He will realize for himself with direct knowledge. What direct knowledge is you see the truth for yourself. This is, you don't believe something, you learn the teachings and you look at it and you experience it for yourself with direct knowledge. In this very life, the taintless liberation of mind, this is completely having eliminated all the pollution, those 10 fetters, the mind is then liberated by wisdom. You have to have direct knowledge in order to liberate the mind by wisdom, because you're not believing the teachings, you're learning them and you're practicing them. And with that direct knowledge, you gain wisdom and the mind is liberated by wisdom. And having entered upon it, he will dwell in it. So the mind will dwell in this liberated state, which is liberated by wisdom. What 5? Here, a bhikkhu dwells contemplating the unattractiveness of the body, perceiving the repulsiveness of food, perceiving non-delight in the entire world, contemplating impermanence in all conditioned phenomena, and he has perception of death well established internally. If these 5 things do not slip away from a frail and sick bhikkhu, it can be expected of him in no long time, with the destruction of the taints, he will realize for himself with direct knowledge in this very life the taintless liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom, and having entered upon it, he will dwell in it. So here the Buddha is giving 5 things that are very, very important to learn and understand with direct knowledge to experience. One thing that he talks about is contemplating the unattractiveness of the body. The reason why is because as human beings coming from the animal world, we have this sexual craving. this sexual craving is a central desire. It's a sense of physical contact on the body. We really enjoy having sex with another being. And the reason why is because we see the outside body, we see the skin, and we see the clothes and the hair and earrings or makeup or muscles or whatever it is. And what the Buddha is sharing here is a way to eliminate that, which is oftentimes one of the hardest things for some people, is to contemplate on the unattractiveness of the body. And the way that we do this, if you're looking to eliminate sexual craving, is we get a dissected corpse picture and we meditate by looking at it with our eyes open. Or we meditate in the presence of a corpse that might actually have some odor to it as well. This will help you to see the body as it truly is. Right now, the mind, part of that ignorance or unknowing of true reality, it looks at this human body, this hair, these eyes, this beautiful skin or clothing or whatever, and we look at the body as being so attractive and something we desire and crave, and we want it in order to make us feel good and experience those pleasant feelings. But in order for you to eliminate that, which is one of the strongest cravings that most humans have, is you have to contemplate the unattractiveness of the body. And then perceiving the repulsiveness of food. One of the other things that's really strong for people oftentimes is that we have certain cravings for food. We want chocolate, or we want that favorite dish or that favorite thing to eat. And when we don't get it, the mind becomes discontent with sadness or anger. Or when we do get it, the mind becomes happy, excited, and elated. And what the Buddha is saying here is you need to perceive and have repulsiveness for food. It doesn't mean your mind's always going to be that way, right? And it doesn't mean your mind's always going to think of the human body as unattractive, right? Because when I look at people, I think, yeah, they're a beautiful person, they're a handsome person. Or when I eat certain food, it's like, oh wow, this tastes good. But you go through a period of time where you train the mind for 6 months or a year or what have you to just eat bland food if you need to, and not be attached to eating the most delicious tasting food. You have to get to the point where you're just eating food because you know it nourishes the body. That you're not eating food out of pleasure, out of emotional eating is what we call it, right? So you've got to go through a period of time where you're just eating food for the sake of nourishing the body. And one of the ways that I did this is I had my wife pick my food for like 6 months or a year. I didn't pick any food. She picked all my food, and I just ate whatever she put in front of me. And whatever she put in front of me, I didn't use any spices or herbs or sauces or anything. I just ate whatever was there. If it was bland, if it was sour, if it was bitter, whatever the taste was, I just ate it just to nourish the body. And then once you do that for a period of time and the mind is no longer having this craving, desire, attachment to please the mind through eating food, then at some point you may choose to go back to eating food that, it actually tastes good and it's actually enjoyable. But if the mind gets that, it's not happy, excited, elated, or if it doesn't get that, it's not sad or angered. And only you will know how the mind is experiencing that based on awareness of mind. That's why right mindfulness is so important. So the Buddha is saying here, he speaks in pretty potent language. He talks about perceiving the repulsiveness of food, right? Like you're not here just to gorge and eat food. He talks about moderate eating, right? Just eat just to nourish the body. Then he talks about perceiving non-delight in the entire world, because some people really, really enjoy being in this world and they just think it's so wonderful and so great, and they continue to want to be in this world. There's actually a craving, a longing with a strong eagerness to be in this world. And if you have that, then you're going to be reborn and you're not going to actually attain enlightenment. It doesn't mean that you look down on the world and you look negatively at the world, but you just understand that all these external things, everything that's in the world, isn't going to be satisfactory to the mind. And the idea is to go internal and not seek pleasant feelings or delight in the world itself through all these external things, right? So you have to get to the point where not only are all these agreeable things, going back to something we studied earlier, not only are all these agreeable things that you agree with aren't pleasing the mind, but also certain things that you disagree with aren't repulsive to the mind either. So something that James brought up on Wednesday in America, when a lot of people were observing people attacking the Capitol, a lot of people became very angry and upset and, these kind of things. It doesn't mean that you agree or disagree with what happened in that situation, but if that was repulsive to you and you got angry, that's because you saw something with the eye that was repulsed, that was disagreeable to you, and then you were repulsed by it. Or if you really thought it was a great thing and you agreed with people attacking the Capitol and you got very excited because of that, then that is an agreeable thing that the mind is delighting in. And what the Buddha is saying is you've got to kind of disconnect from either of these things and just observe things that are going on in the world without delight and not taking pleasure in all of these things that are going on in the world. And then the next thing he talks about here is contemplating impermanence in all conditioned phenomena. This is something that I teach from the very beginning of the group learning program, is observing impermanence in all things. And as long as you contemplate that and you understand that and you have that wisdom, then the Buddha is basically saying, that's a very good thing for you. And then the last thing he talks about here is the perception of death is well established internally in the mind. So these 5 things, the Buddha is kind of prioritizing and saying, hey, these are things that you really need to cultivate and really deeply ingrain in the mind and understand. And even when you're sick and frail, if you don't allow these things to slip out of the mind, and you also eliminate these 10 fetters, then you will experience liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom, and having entered into enlightenment or liberation of mind, you will dwell in it. The mind will always be permanently in this state of enlightenment or liberation of mind.
Okay, we have a number of people interested in the next chapter, chapter 36, which is titled, There Is No You There.
Yes.
And so Amina asked if David, you might be able to go through this one in depth, because it's quite a powerful chapter.
Okay. I don't know how to pronounce the name here, but I'll try. Chapter 36. There is no you there. Is it you or your? What is it in the book? My little thing has it differently.
In the book, it's you.
It's you. Okay. I got to update my little slide here. Should be you. There is no you there. Then Bahaya. I'll say Bahaya. Okay. Then Bahaya. So this is somebody that the Buddha is speaking to, probably a household practitioner. Because if it was a bhikkhu, they usually talk venerable, or they'll say bhikkhu and they'll say the name. So this is probably a household practitioner. And if it was a Brahmin, he would say the Brahmin first. So it's probably a household practitioner. Then Bahaya. When for you there will be only the seen in reference to the seen, only the heard in reference to the heard, only the sensed in reference to the sensed, only the cognized in reference to the cognized. Then Bahaya, there is no you in connection with that. When there is no you in connection with that, there is no you there. When there is no you there, you are neither here nor yonder, nor between the two. This, just this, is the end of stress. So what he's talking about here is realizing non-self and describing how somebody will think if they have realized non-self. And the first paragraph is kind of encapsulating that. What he's saying here is, when for you there will be only the seen in reference to the seen, meaning like what you see is not you. Only the heard, so the things that you hear, the things that you say, it's not you. The things that are sensed, like all these senses that you have, this is not you. This is not who you are. Cognize, things that you think about, things that are in the consciousness. This is not you. So there is no you in connection with that. So all of those things are not you. The things that you see, the things that you hear, the things that you sense through the senses, the things that you think, none of these things are you. And what the Buddha is then saying in that last little paragraph is he's saying, when there is no you in connection with that, so in connection to all those things, when you realize that there is no you and those things aren't you, then there is no you there. Then there is no self. You've essentially realized non-self when you realize deeply in the mind that none of those things are you. When there is no you there, when there is no self, you are neither here and you're not yonder, you're not over there either, and you're not in between. So essentially there is no you, right? This is what the Buddha is saying, is there is no you there, right? And this, just this, is the end of stress. So when you get rid of that self, then you'll notice that you'll end your stress, because you're essentially creating stress for yourself. Like we might say, the kids are stressing me out, or my husband is stressing me out, or my job is stressing me out. No, you're stressing yourself out because all of these things that you see, all of these things that you hear, all the things coming through your senses, all the things you're thinking about, you're allowing the mind to become stressed. And when you get rid of the self and there no longer is a self, then this is the end of stress. And you'll no longer feel stress ever again.
So by saying, for example, only the heard in reference to the heard, is he saying there is just sound? There's no one who is hearing the sound. It's not that I am hearing the sound. There is just the experience of sound. There is just the experience of seeing, of cognizing, etc.
Exactly, Max. You're exactly correct.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. All right, so we had some interest in chapter 39, which is the carrier of the burden. So we actually had a specific question from Judith on this one.
Okay.
And she asks, I'd like to know more on the aggregates and the meaning of the consciousness aggregate. Thank you very much.
Sure. So the Buddha gives these 5 aggregates as a way of understanding the being, the human being. The form aggregate is the physical body, right? The feelings aggregate are the feelings, painful feelings, pleasant feelings, feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. The perception aggregate is how you perceive things, how you look at others and you kind of assume things, or you look at certain situations and you perceive or you assume things, right? This is the perception. And it's oftentimes wrong, right? And you shouldn't assume. We know what happens when you assume. Well, an assumption is a perception. If you're perceiving something to be a certain way, it's not based on direct knowledge. It's not based on experience. You're just perceiving something a certain way, and it's subject to clinging. And if you hold on to this perception of certain situations or certain people, it's going to cause the mind to be discontent. You know, oftentimes when you meet somebody in the first 30 seconds, if you judge them and you have a certain perception, or maybe you don't even talk to them, you just see somebody have their hairstyle a certain way or clothes a certain way or gesturing a certain way, you might have a certain perception of them. And if you hold on to that and cling to that, it's going to cause discontentedness. Just like if you cling to your feelings or you cling to the form, the physical form. Clinging is another way of saying craving, desire, attachment. So if you cling to the physical form, if you cling to your feelings, if you cling to these perceptions assumptions of others, assumptions of other situations, you're going to cause discontentedness. If you cling to volitional formations, these are the way that the mind thinks of certain choices for the future. If you cling to those certain decisions that you've made, then the mind's going to be discontent because you're going to want it to be a certain way for this future event that you've imagined. And when you get to that future event, if you're not living in the present moment, the decision you made 3 days ago or 3 months ago might not be the best decision now because of impermanence. Everything's changed. So you've got to let the mind be rooted in the present moment and make a decision in the present moment. If you're making a decision, several days, several months, or even a few hours or minutes in advance, then if you cling to those decisions and choices, then you're going to cause the mind to be discontent because you're not living in the present moment and you're not basing your decision based on the conditions of situations that are happening right now. The consciousness aggregate is the mind itself, the consciousness. And if there's certain thoughts that arise in the mind, and if you hold on to certain views and opinions, then you're going to cause yourself discontentedness. So these 5 aggregates is essentially what makes a human being. And if there's clinging to any of these 5 aggregates, there's going to be discontentedness. So the Buddha is teaching you to not cling to these 5 aggregates, because if you do, this is the burden. And by having these 5 aggregates as a human being, you're essentially carrying around the burden. So this is where he goes on later, where he says, in what bhikkhus is the carrier of the burden? It should be said, the person, right? So the 5 aggregates are describing the person. Carrying these 5 aggregates around is the person, right? And that's your name, right? Who you are. And then he talks about taking up the burden. He talks about craving. So having this mental longing with a strong eagerness leads to renewed existence. So if you die with craving in the mind, mental longing and strong eagerness, there's going to be a new existence. There is renewed existence. He also uses the phrase, craving is the fuel that leads to the next rebirth. You'll see that in a future teaching. So craving leads to renewed existence. If there's rebirth, then you're going to get these 5 aggregates again. You're going to have this burden of these 5 aggregates, and then you're going to be carrying them around. And then the way that you take up that burden is you continue to have craving, you're going to continue to have renewed existence, and then that is accompanied by delight and desire. That's the actual craving. Seeking delight here and there. This is seeking pleasure through the 6 senses. The 5 that you know of in the mind. These are the 6 sense bases, right? So if you seek delight or pleasure through these 6 senses, then that's seeking delight here and there. Craving for sensual pleasure, right? That's the mental longing and strong eagerness through these 6 senses. Craving for existence. This is what we were talking about just a bit ago. Craving, mental longing and strong eagerness to have this existence, right? Holding on to this existence or some future existence. There's people that actually want to be reborn. And then the last one he talks about is craving for extermination. This is a craving to end your life. This is suicide, right? This is where if you commit suicide, you're actually making the problem worse. People think that they only get one life, and if they kill themselves, it solves all the discontentedness in their mind, and they no longer have to live with that discontentedness. But in reality, they're dying with craving. They're having a craving for extermination of life. They're now going to be reborn, most likely in the lower realms, because they don't have right view. So they're going to be reborn either in the hell, afflicted spirits, or animal realm. And they've actually made the problem worse, because once you get into those lower realms, as we have all been there before, it's very hard to get out of those lower realms into a human life. So being in this human life, this is the most ideal situation to learn and practice the teachings to improve the condition of the mind and escape this whole cycle of rebirth. So the Buddha talks about rebirth as taking up the burden. So if you have craving, this leads to new existence, and you're going to take up this new burden of having delight, desire, seeking delight here and there, craving for sensual pleasure, craving for existence, or craving for extermination. And as long as there's this craving, there's going to continue to be this burden that you carry around. As the mind becomes more and more enlightened, the body and the mind becomes very light. You know, sometimes when you're done with a particular day, have you ever had a day where your feet just feel like they're like 100-pound stones on each foot, and you can't even walk another step? It's like you're carrying 100 pounds or 100 kilos on each foot. Or the body just feels so heavy, it's like, you just want to like drop down somewhere because the body's so heavy. That's the burden that the Buddha is talking about that you're carrying around, because all day long you've been seeking through these senses. You've been seeking these sensual desires, and that's a real burden to carry around for many, many years. And this is why sometimes at the end of your day, you just feel like a ton of bricks and you just want to set them down. Well, the way to truly set down the burden is to train the mind to let go of this craving, desire, attachment. That's what's causing the mind to be so burdened, and that's what's causing the body to feel so heavy. So by laying down the burden is these 5 aggregates, this craving, desire, attachment, holding on and clinging to these 5 aggregates. By laying that down, by training the mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, then you're setting down the burden of having to carry around this physical form. And once you attain enlightenment in this life, the body is just very light and very peaceful, because the mind's very light and very peaceful. You'll never feel like you're carrying around a ton of bricks again, because you've laid down the burden by training the mind to enlightenment.
This craving for existence, David, can this also mean a more general like craving to become something, someone, a certain kind of person or being who has status or a certain income and is seen a certain way? Does this also come under this craving for existence?
I look at what you just described as part of craving for sensual pleasures, because remember, the senses include the mind. So the ego's in there thinking that I want to be so important, I want to be significant, I want everybody to see how wonderful I am. And this is craving through the sensual pleasures. Craving for existence is just purely existing in some form or some formless realm. And then extermination is, there's people who want to end this life and they want to get it over with, rather than face the real problem, which is the discontent mind. Is if somebody is experiencing suicidal thoughts, the better thing to do is, rather than kill yourself and make the problem worse, because you're going to be reborn countless more times before you get back to the human realm, the better thing to do is to face those problems through training the mind in the Buddhist teachings. And then you can eliminate the suicidal thoughts, eliminate all craving, for not just for extermination, but for existence, for these sensual pleasures. And then you'll lay down the burden for good, and you'll never be reborn ever again.
Okay, thank you, David. So we had some interest in chapter 42 from Judith and Biplop, and this is entitled "The Mind Has Attained to the End of Craving." And they actually both asked a question, which is, who is the house builder that's being referred to here?
Yeah, this is a great one to connect to what we were just talking about. The house builder is you in the craving, right? So this is real short, I'll just read it. The mind has attained to the end of craving. Through the round of many births, I roamed, without reward, without rest, seeking the house builder. Painful is birth, again and again. House builder, you're seen. You will not build a house again, all your rafters broken, the ridge pole dismantled. Immersed in dismantling, the mind has attained to the end of craving. So essentially, by having craving, you're going to keep roaming around, being reborn over and over and over again, without reward, without rest, seeking the house builder, seeking existence, right? Craving existence. And what the Buddha is saying here is, aha, I saw you, house builder. You will not build a house again, meaning you're not going to be reborn again. Everything's been broken, the rafters, the roof, right? The ridge pole. Through learning, practicing the teachings, attaining enlightenment, you're immersing yourself in dismantling this mind that wants to just keep being reborn over and over and over again. That's the house builder. The mind's craving just keeps wanting to build this house over and over and over again. The house is some kind of form or formless being. So through learning and practicing the teachings, you're dismantling this. You're breaking it down so that there'll no longer be existence.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Dave. Yeah, it does follow on quite nicely from the last chapter we looked at. Okay, so I was wondering if we could look at chapter 43 in
Sure.
this fathom-long body. And I thought we could just perhaps look at this one generally.
Okay. We may not get to the other ones, but that's okay. Whatever you guys are interested in talking about. So, chapter 43. In this fathom-long body, I say, friend, that by traveling one cannot know, see, or reach that end of the world where one is not born, does not grow old and die, does not pass away and get reborn. Yet I say that without having reached the end of the world, there is no making an end of discontentedness. It is in this fathom-long body endowed with perception and mind that I proclaim the world, the origin of the world, the cessation of the world, and the way leading to the cessation of the world. This one, I'm not 100% sure on the first paragraph. The last paragraph is kind of a reference to the Four Noble Truths, but he's doing it in a different way. He'll do this sometimes where he doesn't always use the word discontentedness. He'll use other words like stress or other things like this and refer to the Four Noble Truths. I'm not 100% sure what he's talking about here in the first paragraph. Let me see if I can read it again. I say, friend, that by traveling one cannot know, see, or reach that end of the world where one is not born, does not grow old and die. Oh, okay. Does not pass away and get reborn. Yet I say that without having reached the end of the world, there is no making an end of discontentedness. The only thing that I can see here is maybe he's talking about not being reborn. And that's what I'm seeing here. But there's nothing that you can really take from this, from what I'm seeing, and actually go practice, right? And kind of see, how does this improve my life? I think he's just once again stressing the importance of not being reborn and understanding the Four Noble Truths so that you won't be reborn. I think that's what I can take away from this.
Okay. So Biplov was also interested in looking at the next chapter,
44.
chapter 44,
Okay.
which is called the perfectly enlightened one's complexion is no longer pure and bright. The limbs are all flaccid and wrinkled.
Biplab, do you have a certain question on this? Because essentially what the Buddha is doing here is he's just kind of describing his own impermanence of his own physical body and describing how his body is aging and frail and getting old and no longer looks the way that it used to look. And then he goes on and he talks about, old age and beauty fading. And what else is he talking about here? He's just saying how death pretty much ends everything and the body just is impermanent. And continues to degrade, all the different senses, the same 5 senses, the eye, the nose, the mouth, the ears, the bodily contact, all of that stuff is faded, even for him, because his body was impermanent as well.
Okay, so I suggest we go forward then. We're sort of getting to the end now, David.
Okay.
And we have a question from Alan on chapter 49. And
Okay.
This is a really, really potent chapter, I felt. So the chapter is called 3 Urgent Tasks.
Yes.
And Alan asks, I assume that training in 1, higher behavior, 2, higher mind, and 3, higher wisdom relates directly to the Noble Eightfold Path.
Yes. So here, 3 urgent tasks. Bhikkhus, there are these 3 urgent tasks of a farmer. What 3? First, the farmer swiftly yet thoroughly plows the field, and swiftly yet thoroughly harrows it. Next, he swiftly sows seeds, and then he swiftly irrigates and drains the field. These are the 3 urgent tasks of a farmer. So remember, he's talking mainly to rural people, that things that they understand. So he's taking something that they already understand, which is a process of planting a field, and he's equating it to his teachings so that there's a direct connection to what it is that he's teaching. He says, this farmer has no psychic potency or spiritual might by which he could command, let my crops start growing today, let them mature tomorrow, let them bear grain the day after tomorrow. But with the change of seasons, there comes a time when the crops grow, mature, and bear grain. So he's talking about like the farmer has no ability to make it grow right now, mature right now, and then bear grain right now. But over time, gradually with the seasons, these crops will grow, mature, and bear grain. This gradual training, right? So too, bhikkhus, there are these 3 urgent tasks of a bhikkhu. What 3? The undertaking of training in higher virtuous behavior. This is the moral conduct. The undertaking of training in the higher mind. This is the mental discipline. And by undertaking of the training in higher wisdom. So these are the 3 sections of the Eightfold Path. That's right, Alan. But usually we refer to them wisdom, moral conduct, and mental discipline. Here the Buddha kind of switched them a little bit. But he's the Buddha. He can do whatever he wants. That's how he taught it. So we're kind of putting it in a way that we understand. These are the 3 urgent tasks of a bhikkhu. This bhikkhu has no psychic potency or spiritual might by which he could command, let my mind be liberated from the taints by non-clinging today, or tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow. Rather, as this bhikkhu trains in the higher virtuous behavior, the higher mind, and the higher wisdom, there comes an occasion when his mind is liberated by the taints by non-clinging. So here he's talking about gradual progress, that you can't do it right now. And this is probably really good for people who are studying the Buddhist teachings nowadays, because we're kind of programmed that we want everything right now, today. I want to be enlightened today, tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, right? The Buddha is saying it's not possible. You need to gradually train the mind in this direction. And he's pointing towards the Eightfold Path as the way to do that.
So is he saying that practicing wisdom, conduct, and mental discipline, these are like the causes for good results?
Absolutely.
But if we go out and just try and make the results happen, that's not really going to bear fruit or bear crops in this case, because we're trying to kind of make something happen without having actually put the cause in place for it to happen.
Right. He's saying like psychic potency or spiritual might, like you can't just command these things to happen with some kind of psychic potency or spiritual might. You've got to diligently apply time, effort, energy, and resources toward attaining the goal. And over time, these things will grow and mature and bear fruit.
Okay, thank you, David.
This is developing a life practice, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so we've had a request just in. Messiah's asking if we can cover chapter 51.
Sure. 51.
Chapter 51. 4 observable benefits for one learning the teachings by ear.
Okay, so this is quite the long one. Yeah. This looks like it's almost two pages and a half. All right. So let's just go through this one. This might be our last one. 51. 4 observable benefits for one learned the teachings by ear. Remember, they're learning all the teachings by ear. It's all oral during the Buddha's his lifetime. Bhikkhus, when one has learned the teachings by ear, recited them verbally, examined them with the mind, and penetrated them well by view, 4 benefits are to be observed. So he was encouraging all his students to learn the teachings by ear orally, to be able to then recite them, so to remember them and actually recite them verbally, and then also be able to examine them and reflect on them. He never said to believe him. It was all about examining his teachings, investigating his teachings, and then penetrating them well through your own views and your own opinions. That's the real investigation. And he's saying there's 4 benefits of you doing this. So for you, you're not going to probably hear these teachings only by ear. You're not going to maybe be able to recite them verbally, but you can still penetrate them and you can still investigate them deeply, like we're doing in this group, and outside of the group through personal interaction as well, and talking to each other and talking with me. So what he's saying is, what are the 4 benefits? Here, a bhikkhu masters the teachings, discourses, mixed prose and verse, expositions, verses, inspired utterances, quotations, birth stories, amazing accounts, and questions and answers. He has learned those teachings by ear, recited them verbally, examined them with mind, and penetrated them well by view. He passes away muddled in mind and is reborn in a certain group of devas. They're the happy ones, right? Because the devas are always experiencing pleasant feelings, like I mentioned. They don't experience painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant. So he says they're the happy ones. Recite passages of the teachings to him. The arising of his memory is sluggish, but then that being quickly reaches distinction. So his mind in that heavenly realm is somewhat sluggish, but then as he starts to slowly learn the teachings, they start to kind of come back to him a little bit, right? This is the first benefit to be observed when one has learned the teachings by ear, recited them verbally, examined them with mind, and penetrated them well by view. So essentially what he's talking about here is that by you learning and practicing his teachings, it doesn't just help you in this life, but should you ever be reborn into another life, into another realm, particularly here in the heavenly realm, your mind is still going to retain some of the memory of these teachings. It's not going to just be emptied out when you have this new existence in another realm. Your mind might be sluggish, it might be slow to kind of recall, but any work that you're doing right now in this life, it's going to, of course, benefit you in this life, but it's also going to benefit you in any future lives as well. And we could go through each one of these, but essentially that's what he's getting to, is he's explaining how your work in this life is helping you here in this life, but it's also going to help you in a future life as well. And he just gives different variations of this as he goes through, and it gets better and better the more that someone learns and understands, the more benefit they're going to get in this life or some future life. So rather than read through this whole thing, which is essentially just describing the same thing over and over, just understand that. And then finally, by the time he gets to the end, he's talking about how people truly remember in their future lives that they once studied his teachings. That if you study them in this life and you happen to be reborn in a future life, you'll get to a point where you can actually potentially remember, oh yeah, I remember, I used to practice those teachings in the past. And let's see. And he talks about it and he relates it here. He says, suppose there were two friends who had played together in the mud. By chance, they would meet one another later in life. Then one friend would say to the other, do you remember this friend? Do you remember that friend? And the other would say, I remember, friend, I remember. So too, a bhikkhu masters the teachings. The arising of his memory is sluggish, but then that being quickly reaches distinction. So eventually, as you remember the teachings, you will get to enlightenment as each life is building upon you getting closer and closer to enlightenment. And then he just sums it up and says, these are the 4 benefits of someone who is learning his teachings, reciting them verbally, examining them with the mind, and penetrating them well by view. So not everything is lost. Whatever you're learning and practicing in this life, if you don't attain enlightenment in this life, it will benefit you in future lives as well.
Why do you think, David, he says that the arising of his memory is sluggish, but then that being quickly reaches distinction?
So it's going to be challenging to bring the memories back. It's going to be sluggish. It's going to not be so easy. But then eventually, once the memories do come into the mind, where you remember the teachings from a previous life, then you will quickly reach distinction. You will quickly remember them and start to be able to get closer to enlightenment in a quick form, because you've done this work in the past. So while your memory in a future life might start out sluggish and you might not remember the teachings, once you finally do start remembering them, then it'll be more easy for you to bring in the teachings and actually progress to enlightenment. This is why some people who start learning these teachings in a matter of a short period of time, boom, they can learn them and be off to the, first, second, third, fourth stage of enlightenment in a relatively short period of time, where other people, it just takes a lot longer and they may not ever get to enlightenment in this life because maybe they haven't studied them in a previous life. Where people who have studied these teachings in a previous life, once they get connected up with these teachings, they will tend to make progress quite quickly.
Okay, thank you, David. That's all of our questions this time.
Okay, so we've covered everything that you guys had questions about. So this was quite an interesting session. We definitely had a lot more time than our last session because we didn't talk about all the admin stuff. But I feel like this was really good to really help you guys to learn the teachings. And you see here, learning the Buddhist teachings, they're very illuminating, right? This is his words. And the more you learn them, the more you practice them, and you'll see that they're actually true. But you need guidance. This is why you wouldn't be able to attain enlightenment on your own. You need somebody to help you go through and uncover and pull back the covers to understand the Buddhist teachings. And that's what I'm here for. So the more time that you spend learning these teachings before class, the more that you can come into the class and you can actually gain benefit and actually ask questions and then understand these teachings more and more so that you can practice them in daily life. And it's just gradual learning over a consistent period of time. What we're going to be doing next Saturday is we're going to be studying this other book, Sotapanna. This is all about the first stage of enlightenment. We're going to be studying chapters 1 through 27. So between now and then, you can read those. And, it might take you an hour to read those. But remember, you don't need to actually sit down and read them in all one sitting. In fact, I suggest that if possible, you don't do that. Maybe what you do is you read 10 minutes a day, or 5 minutes a day, or 15 minutes a day. That way you kind of slowly bring it into the mind. That's the best way to do this. If you sit down and you try to read it all at one time, because there's so many different topics being discussed, it's a lot to put into the mind and chew on. So, this is essentially the first 27 chapters of this book, and it almost equates to the same amount as the entire book of what we read before. So if I was you, if you sat down and read for an entire hour last time, what I would do is just do 5 or 10 minutes a day, maybe 15 minutes a day, either before your meditation or after your meditation, however you choose to do that. But just slowly, gradually take these teachings in little by little. You can always send me a message if you're reading. You don't have to wait until class to ask a question. You can always send me questions, or you can wait and think about it for a while and really try to figure it out yourself and then ask in class. But through slowly going through these books, like we're going to be doing over the next 7 months, you will gradually learn more and more of the Buddhist teachings directly with his own words, which can be very illuminating. And we're going to get into some various topics as we go. Now, in this particular book, Sotapanna, you're going to see a lot more references to the 5 realms. You're going to see references to hell, afflicted spirits, the animal realm, the human realm, the heavenly realm. And remember what I shared when we talked about this in the group learning program. These 5 realms of existence weren't taught by the Buddha as a way of fearing you or guilting you or shaming you into learning and practicing his teachings. These 5 realms are 100% truth. And the more that your mind awakens, you may come in contact with some of these realms. And you may have already, even in the unenlightened mind, people oftentimes see ghosts. You've definitely been in contact with the animal realm. And you may have even had demonic spirits or spirits from hell that have interacted with you. And you may have been in contact with beings from the heavenly realm. So you may already know that these realms exist, even in the unenlightened mind. But as the mind awakens more and more, these various beings can interact with you. And the Buddha's talking about these just a little bit, or referencing them more so in this book than the other book. So don't take it as him trying to fear you or guilt you into learning and practicing his teachings, because nothing he says has that kind of perspective. But if you have conditioning in your mind from previous traditions where other people have tried to guilt you, shame you, or fear you into learning and practicing teachings based on referencing things like hell or other aspects of the realms, then when you read the Buddhist teachings, that conditioning might come up in your mind. So just a heads up for you, that if you have awareness of mind and you notice any of that coming up in the mind, let that go, because that's not what the Buddha is doing here. The Buddha is just teaching you the truth, and he's not trying to guilt, shame, or fear. You'll never see him do that in any of his teachings. But if you have that conditioning from other venues or other traditions, it might kind of make you feel that way. But that's your perceptions, right? That's your perceptions. So don't hold on to those perceptions. Don't cling to those. Let those perceptions go. Let that conditioning go from other traditions that you might have studied, and just look at what's on the page and what the Buddha is really saying, where he's explaining that once you reach this first stage of enlightenment as a stream enterer, you will no longer be reborn into hell or afflicted spirits or animal realm. You've progressed past that. So make sure you understand the perspective here, and that you are going to be seeing more of that. By the time we get into the 11th book, which is the thickest book that we have, you're going to be learning a lot about the 5 realms. But this is going to be a few months from now. But that particular book that we're going to read now, it's got reference to these realms, because by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you at that point are kind of bound for enlightenment, either in this life or some subsequent life to that life. So getting to that first stage of enlightenment, it's a minimum of 7 births before you, a maximum of 7 births before you get to enlightenment. Some people, once they get to the first stage of enlightenment, get to enlightenment this life. Or maybe you've already been human in a few previous lives, and now you'll progress through. But you'll see these references in the book, and I just wanted to kind of make you aware of that, so that if you notice any discontentedness coming up when he's talking about hell or referencing hell or afflicted spirits or animal realm, you'll understand that that's your own perceptions. If you look at what the Buddha's teachings, he's not guilting, shaming, or fearing you into learning and practicing the teachings. In fact, he's telling you something good. He's saying, hey, once you get to this first stage of enlightenment, you will no longer go back to being reborn in one of those lower realms. Okay? So thank you all for joining. As I mentioned, I feel like this has been a really in-depth session, and you can see now why studying in the group learning program is really preparation for getting into this program. But if you haven't yet completed the Developing Life Practice, the group learning program, that's okay. You can actually be doing both at the same time. Or if you've already taken the group learning program and you're studying this program, you can still be learning in the group learning program, Developing a Life Practice as well, because it's all the Buddhist teachings. It's a matter of building your understanding more and more so that you can then practice it in daily life. So thank you for joining. I appreciate your time, effort, energy, and dedication to learning and practicing these teachings. I'll see you tomorrow, perhaps, for chapter 24 of the book, Developing a Life Practice, which is Misunderstandings of Gotama Buddha's Teachings. Or perhaps on Wednesday, when we'll be doing meditation and chanting, I believe. And then next Saturday, when we're going to be exploring the first 27 chapters of this book. So I'll see you one of those days, or perhaps all of those days. Until then, have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Sawadee khap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.